So welcome, bienvenue à Fantasia. Welcome to Fantasia. I am absolutely thrilled to be here today presenting the world premiere of Fugitive Dreams, and we have a stacked Q&A. Like, I feel so blessed. This is such a unique opportunity to be able to talk to so many people involved with the film all at once. Hopefully you just watched it or you are going to watch it soon because you should. I'd like to introduce everyone. I want to get started as soon as possible so we could cover as much ground as possible. I have, I don't know how everyone else is looking, but I have at the corner, Jason Neulander, the director, co-writer, producer as well, or?
Co-producer.
Yeah, there we go. And I have Peter Simonite, who is the cinematographer. I have Robbie Tann, who is one of our lovely leads. I have Scott Shepard, O-Lan Jones, two of our supporting cast. April Matthis, another one of our stars. Caridad Svitch, who is the playwright and co-writer. I have Michelle Randolph Fairs, one of the producers. Jennifer Kuczaj, who is another producer. Mike Saenz, that's correct? Saenz, who is the editor. Another one of our lovely acting cast, David Patrick Kelly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's honestly such a privilege for us at Fantasia to be having you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
So
Merci mille fois.
Merci.
Merci bien.
Sorry about that.
No, it's beautiful. You have a fantastic accent too, so it's very, very flattering. We love it. So since we have so many of you, I thought this would be such an amazing opportunity to kind of go through the history of making this movie. This is a smaller budget film. It's in the underground section, and it has this long past where it started as a play that was written almost 2 decades ago now, but still has so much resonance. I would love for us to kind of be able to kind of map this trajectory, and I feel like everyone can have such an input at different times. And so do you want to get started, maybe Caridad, since you're the one who wrote the original play, and then we can kind of transition to the play to how it became a movie?
Yeah, I wrote it in early 2000. And I was thinking a lot about damage and despair in America. I'm still thinking, obviously, about damage and despair in America, and I wanted to write a road movie for the stage. So it was sort of thought in my head it was a film, but I thought how cool it would be to take cinematic ideas and put them in the theater. And I also was interested in making it feel like a murder ballad. In terms of the musical form. And so those ideas kind of came to my brain, and the characters started speaking to me right away. And I actually was I felt like it was sometimes when you write, you feel like something is transmitted through you. And that's how it felt. I felt like things were being transmitted and I was just writing them down. And I kind of shocked by what was happening in a good way, I think, but also really scared, which I think is a good place to be in as a writer. And then it premiered in Dallas at a place called Kitchen Dog Theater, and then had production in Cleveland. And then Jason and I had known each other for a long time, and we kind of kept circling around which play we got to work together, when. And then he kind of fell in love with this one, and actually suggested making I'd gone through productions, and then it was like, can we talk about like rewriting some stuff? And like thinking about it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I never thought about doing that. And then, I went down to Austin to Salvage Vanguard, and, all I can say is it's like in my life, like as a writer, like it's in the top 3 ever, best, like ever. He got it. He nailed it. I was like, there's my play. And it was so exciting. And then at the time he was like, no, it should be a movie. And I was like, I know. And then, but then it was like, we were like, it was sort of in the air. And then, 15 plus years go by, and they come knock on my door. So that's how it happened. That's the short version of a very long story.
I like your Jason voice.
It sounded a lot like him. Yeah, when I directed the play, I did think it would make a great movie, but I didn't really know anything about movies at that time in terms of making them. And life kind of moved on. Obviously 15 years is a long time. But when I was working my way towards directing my first feature, which this is, and went back and looked at a bunch of material from my past to think about things that I might develop into that first feature. And really, I guess, like many people, had a bit of a crisis at the US presidential election in 2016. And the election itself was crisis enough, but the lead up to that was, for me, like really traumatic. I ended up getting off of social media completely as a result of that, because I thought it was just such a poisonous environment. And I realized I wanted to make a movie that was about love as my first feature. So one of the things that I did in figuring out what that would be was reread Caridad's play Fugitive Pieces, and found myself crying at the end of it, and realizing that these characters are speaking to me maybe more than they had originally. And so I called Caridad and asked her if she would consider letting me take a stab at an adaptation. And then I think right after that, called April and O-Lan to ask them if they would be in the movie version. April, which is very April, was like, well, I really have to read the script first. O-Lan, on the other hand, was like, yeah, come in. And I was like, well, do you want to read the script? And she was like, oh yeah, that might be a good idea. So anyway, the process of adaptation took about a year. Luckily, because O-Lan and April said they would do it, they actually came to Austin for a weekend, or like a couple days during the week, about a year and a half before we shot, for this like script workshop that we did. That was essential to making the script work. Yeah, and that's kind of how it developed into a screenplay. And then, in the meantime, Michelle Ferris read a very early draft of the script, and really fell in love with it. And so she signed on really early as a producer of this. And then I met Jennifer and Peter the same day, in back-to-back meetings, to talk with Jennifer about co-producing and with Peter about shooting. And both of them, it was just this wonderful, one of the happiest days ever, of just meeting these two incredible people who helped to realize the vision. And when Peter came in, I mean, he was so prepared for this shoot already, just having looked at the lookbook and read the script, and we were nowhere near actually having the money to shoot or anything like that. I mean, I was just trying to put together the team to raise money. But my gosh, I mean, it was an incredible, unbelievable meeting of the minds meeting that was just like, okay, it's clear this guy has got to shoot this film. And there were days on set where I just felt like Peter was like, just stuck a straw in my head and siphoned the images out into the camera. I mean, it was just incredible.
You'll never get those brain cells back.
Yeah. Well, which is why I'm so inarticulate right now. I used to be such a much more articulate, in fact, before meeting Peter. Anyway, and then to wrap up the other folks who were here, I knew I wanted Mike to edit. Mike and I had known each other for years and years and years, and that process we could talk about later, but that was magical as well. And then Scott got involved. You don't even know this, Scott, but you're his agent, his agent and me and him all went to college together.
I know that.
Yeah, you did know that. So Sarah recommended you for John, actually. But in my mind, I was like, that doesn't quite work for me. But oh my God, Scott would be an amazing Israfel. So I asked you to do that, and you amazingly said yes, and probably, yeah, and thank goodness you did. And then David Patrick Kelly was on our list for a long time. And I think I nearly fell backward in my chair when, after we had reached out to his agent, he emailed me directly to say he hoped it would work out. I couldn't believe it. I mean, working with legend like that. And then Robbie was this just miracle. We had this celebrity attached to play the role who ended up dropping out of the picture about a month before shooting started. And we were in this frantic scramble to try to find somebody. And April recommended Robbie and a few other people, and we just got recommended a bunch of people. And Robbie just freaking nailed it in the audition. And 3 days before we're supposed to start rehearsals, I call him up and I'm like, dude, you up for flying to Austin in 2 days to shoot a movie? And that's how that all came together.
I mean, I feel like you've spoken a little bit about like the different process. This is to me such an actor's film, even though it has all these other elements as well, like everything fits together, but like the performances and the characters are really what root so much of its love and appeal. You kind of alluded a little bit to the workshop that you did early on that was essential. So that I find incredibly interesting. I would love if you guys could elaborate a little bit on that. And also kind of the whiplash of the other end of things where you have Robbie literally coming in at the last minute and yet feeling so much a part of the family and so much of a lived persona within the film, and kind of those two different elements working at once.
Well, for the workshop, what was so great about it, and O-Lan and April, you guys should speak to this as well, but for me, on the writing end, was that having these two actors who are going to play the characters, bringing their questions and their concerns and their criticisms to bear, knowing that they would be the ones who would actually play the role, was just like enormously helpful for me to not just like, I mean, these guys like called me on everything that they thought was a cheat in the script and were relentless about it. And it really led, I think, at least for me as a writer, to make it feel like I was doing the most honest adaptation of this material that I loved and keeping the heart and soul of that material while still adapting it for the screen. But you guys should speak to that as well.
Well, Jason was actually the first person to cast me as a lead actor in anything back in 99 when I was recently born. And so that was pretty amazing. And so we had, kind of loosely kept in touch. I was.
What was that? What play was it?
It was Venus by Susan Laurie Parks. Oh. So that was quite an ambitious first play to do. And we did it under a big circus tent, and I wore a fake butt. I was going to ask. The play, that's a choice, and it was a choice that we made. And Jason had this theater company that Caridad mentioned called Salvage Vanguard Theater, and their motto was "I hate theater." And I didn't know what theater was. I didn't grow up with theater. So I was like, I don't know what to hate or what not to hate. And, but they kind of specialized in avant-garde, like new plays, not like your Broadway standards, but really like language playwrights, and which Caridad is. And so coming to do Fugitive Dreams, it was a chance for Jason and I to reacquaint ourselves with each other, because I had been living in New York for the past, 15 some odd years. And I felt like he was meeting a different actor, and so it was a chance for us to just get reacquainted as artists. And for me, I had been to Austin in over a decade, and Austin was kind of where I started performing. So it was a beautiful reunion to come back and see my old college friends and reconnect with my old theater community that was still there, and to rekindle this friendship with Jason, and also to start a relationship with O-Lan, which was really awesome and great. So it's just like a nice full circle thing to be able to work with Jason again.
Did you at all consider maybe using a fake butt again for this role?
We don't know if I did or I didn't.
Oh, right.
Leave that
movie.
to the viewers to decide.
One of the reasons that I was so enthusiastic and immediately said yes is because I know Caridad's work well, and I know the mythos that just bores down into the earth when you're in one of her worlds. And I know her, we were in a composer librettist workshop together, and I wrote music for her fabulous words, and then I later had her write something for my opera company that I directed. So the fact that Caridad and Jason I'd met in another workshop somewhere, we got along, and the fact that it was going to be Caridad's words, and also the description of the character, my character, was like, wow, yeah, I got to do that. But the funny thing was, when we were in all of the readings and things around Jason's table, it was a funny split screen event happening in my mind, because I was looking for the character, and basically my whole technique is to be brainwashed by the words, and then it kind of grabs parts of me and then makes a character. But there were no words for my character. But luckily, April is like genius articulate with saying what's going on in the scene and between people. And I felt like I was just kind of like bumping my head along the road, like looking for what, because every time it comes to my character, it says like caw or something like that. And I tried doing different sounds, and Jason said, no, it's not going to be different sounds. Like, yikes, okay.
Did you have a role model?
Well, finally, he sent, no, I mean, not for who the character was.
The sound.
He sent me a tape recording of a bird. What was the bird in Austin?
A grackle.
A grackle. And I guess I must have really connected hard with that grackle.
I sent you a bunch of grackle videos, and grackle, to me, they're very they're fighters, these birds, and they're fierce and they're scary, and anyway. But Scott, you got to speak to your response. So Scott, we shot the scene with Scott at the church before O-Lan had arrived in Austin to shoot anything. So Scott had to do that sound without having seen it performed in a scene. Do you?
Oh, that's right. But yeah, I hadn't met O-Lan at that point. But I think you sent me a recording of her doing the sound. Yeah,
sent a recording of me.
Yeah,
which was, of course, impossible for anyone else to do. So I did.
Yeah, your text back to me after listening was, "Oh shit."
Yeah, great.
Yeah, O-Lan had sent her. Scott asked for a recording of it, and so I texted O-Lan. The recording that she did. Yeah. Anyway,
I thought about it. I mean, I don't have a very good imitation of my real mother's voice, so I felt like it was realistic that it wasn't a perfect imitation.
You have a career in show business. But then Robbie, talk about we never actually have talked about that aspect of the last second joining in. What was that like for you?
Well, I guess the good thing is, like, there really is no pressure, because without me, you wouldn't have had any movie. So I couldn't, whatever I did would have had to work. So that was kind of a good thing there. But no, I mean, it was definitely terrifying. But I feel like it was obviously reading the script for the first time 10 days before we were shooting was a little bit like, okay, what is this? But I think one of the best parts about it was I've admired April as an actor for years. So I was really looking forward to getting the chance to work with her. And I think a big part of what to me felt like created a great dynamic between us is I felt like we were just every day trying to figure out every single scene as we were going. And I think that was a big part of, it was an exciting part to me too, because I think you can tend to overthink things, especially with such like a complex and a beautifully complex script where there's all these different dynamics going on. I think that it was actually a benefit to not have had all this time beforehand to overthink it and to just be trying to be in the moment to moment with another person in the scene. And then, O-Lan and Scott got introduced into this world, and then DPK got introduced into it. And every time it was like, okay, where are we? What's going on? And that's actually a big part of the movie. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? So I mean, it was definitely thrilling to kind of just like throw caution to the wind, because I've been in features before, but never anything where I was in it every single day on set. Like, so it was definitely being thrown into the fire, but it was exciting. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was good.
And so I have a bit of a double question next, which is how long was the shoot? And also for me, so much of the beauty of the movie as well is the locations. And obviously a lot of it is scouting around in Austin, and I imagine surrounding areas of Texas, which I've never been, so I won't have the same reference points. But I would love if you could kind of tell us how long you were actually there shooting, and then how you went about finding these incredible locations. I mean, even if we're talking about the strange coincidences with this film feeling so relevant, even the drive-in. I mean, that's so wild, right? Like it felt like a relic, but it's not really a relic anymore.
Well, the shoot was 24 days, but over an extended period of time. So the principal shooting took place over like 18 days in January and February of 2018. And then we took like 6 weeks off so that we could get spring weather, hoping that the poppy field would be in bloom when we came back. And that, unfortunately, you cannot coordinate with Mother Nature. So we actually had the actors coming back in for pickups and then for the scenes that needed to be shot in warmer weather, except that the poppies weren't ready. So but we ended up getting pretty far behind when we were shooting on the train. So Scott and O-Lan, I will say, saved the movie's ass by being available to come back and shoot when we weren't expecting to have to do more shooting. But so we finished out the train stuff at the end of March and shot a few other scenes as well, but the poppies still weren't in bloom. So then we shot 2 weeks later. I mean, it was this touch and go thing where everybody was like, be ready to be on a plane like tomorrow, because these poppies are going to be in bloom for a very short window. And if we don't, and this is the end of the movie. So, but this incredible poppy farmer in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is about an hour and a half outside of Austin, just lent us this incredible poppy field you saw in the movie.
You thought we were difficult to work with until you had to deal with those poppies.
I know. Yes, look what Mother Nature thought. So anyway, but the locations a friend of mine who helped out a little bit with the film, a guy named George Sledge, warned me early, like, this movie has a ton of locations. It's going to take much longer than you think to find all of them. You need to like start. And so Peter and I really started looking at potential locations. I mean, almost a year before we started shooting, and building relationships with the people that we would end up shooting at. Like, we had this day of just shooting B-roll of the poppy field a year before we actually shot the poppies, for example, developed this great relationship with the guy who owned the field, who's this like Texas good old boy who, actually threatened us when we first stepped on the property.
Good sign.
But ended up being this incredible friend of the project, and let us shoot for nothing on his field. A year later, when we had the cast, the railroad putting all of the train stuff together was months and months and months of relationship building and coordinating. And at the end of the day, we almost got, relative to the budget of the film itself, the train was practically free. It was an incredible gift on the part of both Cap Metro, who were the owners of the railroad track that we were shooting on and also walking along and stuff like that. And then this group called the Austin Steam Train Association that owned the train itself, the locomotive and the cars that we used. And and then we had to work through the federal government in order to get permission. Everybody had to be safety trained for the train. It was a massive operation. All along, we're thinking in the back of our heads, we may have to shoot this on a process trailer. We might have to build a set for this. But I really have to credit where credit is due. Peter pushed hard for the real train. And then Michelle did this incredible job just coordinating all these people that we had met to make it happen. There were as many people involved with the running of the train and the train track and everything as there were who were actually on set when we were shooting.
It looked like a beautiful process shot.
Yeah.
No, it did. It had that beautiful, hallucinogenic quality, that light through the door coming on.
Mm-hmm.
You thought it was, a process shot.
Yeah, that's great. Because it really was. The train was ostensibly a process vehicle, right? Yeah. I feel like, can I transition? Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about that, the shooting on the train? And
yeah, no, I just, everything you just said, I felt like, you were just talking about, we spent a lot of time researching locations because we knew that would give a lot of production value. The locations, Jason was looking for these kind of infinite locations like the cornfield or the woods or the poppy field and the train. And there's this sense of kind of the infinite out there. And then, Michelle and Jennifer pulling off getting that train and getting all the safety regulations cleared and making sure everything was done safely. It was kind of a gauntlet and a crazy amount of torture, I think, on everybody, because I think, Robbie and Scott and O-Lan and everybody are strapped in when the doors open and bouncing around, and it was freezing and it was really hard, but I agree that it looks kind of magical.
And it was educational.
Yeah,
I learned a lot in my morning training class.
Yeah, we learned where the active shooters were right away when we got into the building, what to do if there was an active shooter. Scared the bejesus out of us. So we took it very seriously.
Out of us, that training was terrifying.
Terrified.
Yeah, I think the woman who ran it mentioned something about how she'd accidentally run over a couple people, and she was just kind of casual about it. So the whole thing was
she said the train is going where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Not the train's fault.
On the tracks.
But one of the challenges that we faced when we were shooting on the train was the fact that it was an active rail line. So once a day, this freight train would come through and we would have to pull off to the side. Like there's this extra special track to pull off onto so that the freight train could come through. And we have that, the freight train actually is featured in some of the second unit train footage that we got. But on day one, the day went, this is before Scott and O-Lan showed up to set. On day one, it went incredibly smoothly. We had 10 shots scheduled. We managed to get through every single one of those shots and we shot more. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a dream. It's going to go great. Scott,
and then we showed up.
Yes, and O-Lan show up, bringing their and anyway, so they're getting into makeup and hair and all that. And when we find out that the freight train is going to come through, so we're like, okay, great. By the time they're ready to go, the train will have come through. We'll shoot, and then all of a sudden, it hasn't come through, and it hasn't come through. Turns out the train got stuck. Well, once they close the rail line off, they can't allow, like, you can't do anything. We could not, literally illegal for us to do anything on the train line until that freight train went through. They had to bring in 2 extra locomotives to get the train to actually move through past us. And 5 hours later, we were shooting. Now, the extra limitation was we were shooting in February, where there's only 10 hours of sun to begin with. And then on top of that, by law, train workers cannot work like headlights into the parking lot, taillights out of the parking lot, more than 12 hours in a shift. So basically we had 8 hours a day to shoot on the train. And we were so cocky after that first day, we were like, oh, we don't need a backup. Who needs a backup plan? Let's go great. So out of our 8-hour shoot day, we lost 5 of those hours. And that was day 2. And then, yeah, and basically the same thing happened on day 3. But at that point, we were ready with a little bit of a backup plan. Ironically, shooting a scene on that day that ended up on the cutting room floor. But that is what ended up putting us like, you know, kind of just painfully, horribly, traumatically for me. Schedule.
Scott,
That's when I knew I was working on a real movie. Because if you're sitting around, like you come and sit around for 5 hours before anything happens, that's movie making.
Scott, how hard was it to jump in the train for your first entrance with O-Lan? How far from the ground?
He threw me off.
It's a little bit of a hop. And then I also had to throw her onto the train.
I noticed. But don't spoil anything for those who haven't seen it.
Okay.
O-Lan does do all of her own stunts in the film.
No, what I really love about the movie,
work.
I love about the movie are the entrances that Jason has given to everyone. And you can tell he's a stage director because everybody, you know, there's a thing in Chinese theater, and I'm not an expert, but I've worked for a long time in Chinese theater with Chinese artists. And it's, you come, the first moment you appear with everything, you know, your entire character. And there's a word for it where you go, bam. And it happens in this movie, you know, it happens. And so I won't spoil Scott and O-Lan's first entrance, but, you know, you didn't cheat? You weren't hanging outside the door of the train?
There was a stunt guy who
Don't tell me.
Jump.
Don't tell me.
You asked.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also Jason's cameo in the film. He plays the second hobo who tries to get on the train too, but doesn't make it.
Scott stomps on my hand. That took a lot of takes because I'm a very bad actor.
But in that one frame, we got everything we needed to know about
That's right.
hobo number 2.
Bam, bam, bam.
There it is. Great entrance.
I mean, the thing for me is that trains is one of the most cinematic images. I mean, it's possibly the first ever image to be in film. If you want to, we can argue semantics on that, but it's one of them.
Which one? Which film, Justine?
The one that the train is going to the train going into the station. that's the where there that was the first public showing of a film.
Is that the
First one
Méliès brothers? Is that the Méliès
It was
brothers?
the Lumière.
Lumière.
The Lumière. Yeah. Milieu was like a few years later. But
Okay.
and then the thing is though, this movie is to me like the moment I like fell in love with it is it reminds me so much of the pre-code films that are often very fugitive based, and also tend to have a lot of trains. So we have movies like to me like William A. Wellman, like Other Men's Women, which is also on the train tracks, people running on top of trains, and this like epic romance that is also so intimate and small. And obviously you also have influences of The Wizard of Oz, which is a bit later than pre-code. And then you have I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang and all of these other films. I would love if you could discuss in terms of aesthetics, and by aesthetics I also include performance, because there is definitely an old Hollywood way of kind of approaching this. This is not necessarily contemporary naturalism, it's old Hollywood naturalism, which is so different. And then of course, how you also interpret that in terms of the visuals, where you have a black and white, which is again a throwback, but again, you're also twisting it in a lot of different and interesting ways.
Well, I think there's so many theater actors who are committed to theater in such a deep way, but we really enjoy, I do at least, you know, trying to roll it back and do nothing but just be photographed, you know, but you know, these actors and I tried to not be afraid to dig in and just express stuff, you know, because I've seen so many people that are just, you know, they're nothing, you know, and you're supposed to just sort of take it from their face, you know, and so I think there's something about the theatrical element, you know, but the love of movies too, which is just like Caridad, you know, the train going by, it just seemed like a movie screen going by outside the train, and you know, the drive-in theater, you know, and one of my favorite lines, which I had to go back and listen to make sure it was April saying, I don't want to see 20-foot people walking around.
Well, that's the thing about, like, it was a play, the language is heightened. You know, it's kind of hard to find a throwaway line in here. Everything is so loaded and poetic and beautiful. And I think the kind of stage actors that we all happen to be, down to a person, are very specific. And so the choices that we make are very specific, that at least for me, it's like, well, this is the way I must speak. And just watching it again tonight, one of the most beautiful passages is John's character talking about the drive-in, and you know, with Hollywood silver in his veins, you know, that's just beautiful writing. And I think, and in that scene, you kind of watch everyone mesmerized, and like shooting it was so hard. That was one scene that we had to go back to and like find the right lighting, and find a way that the flame, it looks like it's all coming from the flame, but it's coming from so many different light sources. And but it works in a really beautiful, intimate way. And like everyone's kind of caught up in the reverie of John's story, which is thanks to Robbie's beautiful like work on it. Like we did it so many times, and every single time it was just like, oh, he's just so in it, and it's so mesmerizing. But that's the language specificity that I'm used to in the theater. That the language is really forward in something that is also so visual.
It has this illusion of sparseness, the language, but it's the same kind of sparseness. You know, there's Hemingway theory called the iceberg theory, you know, where what you see, the language that you see, is just the tip of it, and underneath there is all this real, you know, stuff, the emotion and the truth and everything else. And so the stuff, it reminded me of Steinbeck, it reminded me of Zora Neale Hurston, it reminded me of Tennessee Williams, and so many wonderful things, but it's completely its own thing and has an urgency and an importance for right now as well.
So I wanted to just add, Justine and everyone, that for me as a writer, influenced so much by cinema. I'm such a cinephile, and it's all over my writing. And I think that also part of that is the idea of how characters are framed in light and how they are elemental forces on a screen. And in thinking of the stage play, even when we did it in Austin, the idea of like elemental beings framed in light and framed with sound, and kind of coming through a lot of darkness, but actually fighting to be seen and recognized. And that's something that I love about like those early films, that feel made on the cheap, or at least they seem to be, right? And a kind of sharpness toward how characters are delineated, but also a richness in terms of the poetics of the atmosphere, and how they're enveloped. And so I've always been drawn to those pre-code films as a writer, because I feel like they have secrets for us in a weird way, because they strip everything back but allow so much room to play. And also it's about the image being iconic but not self-referential.
And I mean, in terms of the image, was it shot in the elements that are in black and white? Was it shot in black and white, or was it shot in color and then in the post-production process?
Yeah, we thought a lot about that, because Jason was talking about Grapes of Wrath and Dorothea Lange and this kind of American despair, kind of Americana, these iconic locations like the drive-in and everything. And we tested some monochrome digital cameras. But because we had all this day for night sequences where we would be shooting during the day, we felt like if we shot on a color format, we could key the sky or key skin tones and make it darker, and it would just kind of made it easier to accomplish the look that we were going for. So we did end up shooting on color and then drawing the color out.
Actually, there's a very super technical, but interesting to me anyway. When John is looking at the postcards, if we had shot that in black and white, there's one of just the graphic design of one of the postcards was very hard to read what city it was. And I wanted to be very clear that he was looking at cities like around the entire world, that this is part of his vision of this place he wanted to go, this place where all the places in the world come together. And so having shot in color, I said to our color grader, could you key in on the red in that postcard and just make it black on the screen just to make it pop? And he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about it. And so he just did that. And so, that one moment alone.
And the sequence with April going into the water and kind of baptizing herself there, it was also, we did that during the day with a mirror at the reflecting the sun on the water, and then keep the sky and replace that with the moon and everything. I thought it worked really nicely.
Such a beautiful, beautiful shot.
Another happy accident location. That was like the back of somebody's like cow's pond or something.
Yes.
Cow pond.
Pre-COVID.
No snakes.
Do you want to talk about your experience with that pond?
That what?
Do you want to talk about your experience with that pond?
My experience, in fact, mine and Jen's experience with that pond is that it was a happy accident that we found it. It was right up the road from where they were already shooting, but we were in a time crunch. And in order to make our day, everyone, all hands on deck on the production that was actually happening on location. So the line producer, Jen, and myself went in to clean out this really disgusting pond that when Peter and Jason, I'll never forget it. Peter and Jason scouted it on a quick break. They were like, yes, this will work. But Peter was really adamant that there was this, like, along the perimeter of this pond, there's like, I don't know, like 10 or 12 feet, Peter, of like algae, of this buildup of algae. And Peter was like, if we could just remove this, along this stretch of about, I don't know, 20 feet or so. And we were like, well, how the fuck are we supposed to do that? Who's going to do that? And Jen and Shauna Flanagan, who was an amazing line producer and just such a major contribution to this film, we all kind of looked at each other and we were like, well, I guess it's us. So for some reason we had wetsuits and Shauna had a bathing suit on her and but I will say this, Peter, when I rewatched it again tonight, I looked at it and I was like, he was right. That it had to be cleared out. It looks beautiful. So yeah, it was awesome. I probably wouldn't do it now, but
yeah.
The glamour of it all.
Yeah. But it was amazing. Yeah.
So I'm just going to take a moment to take note that I do have some audience questions that I want to get to, but I'd like to quickly jump into the post-production and in particular the edit, because I think that people underestimate how difficult it is to actually assemble a road movie, because you're dealing with so many different kinds of moments and so many different locations that you have to kind of interconnect in a way that feels very natural and seamless, and yet is also building a rhythm towards the characters and everything. Can you maybe discuss that aspect of creating the film and how much of it was planned and how much ends up being these nice, happy accidents?
It's always a mix because, aside from the technical and the voluminous challenge we had with there was never a bad shot, never a bad take. The performances were all so, it was just a matter of choosing the best. And Jason told me, well, we're going to rehearse everything a lot and we're going to shoot it very, very, one way and move on, very stage stuff. And I thought, okay, well, I can do this by myself without an assistant. And it turned out we actually made a commercial feature with all the footage, all the coverage that we would normally have. So it just took a lot of iterations. I just had to do it again and again and again and just trust the process. I think that aside from any technical challenge, that's the hardest thing about this movie is to find the tone. Mm-hmm. And the tone is always, it's very, very serious, very, very moody, but that's not going to engage people without the humanity and the humor. So I didn't think of it a lot as a road movie. I thought of it just kind of as any kind of hallucinatory art piece and try and slowly engage people. And then we just watch it again and just back and forth. It just took a lot of iterations.
And how long would you say the editing process took?
Probably, let's see, 4 or 5 months all. And then we probably circled back and did a few more edits. Some things happened very quickly. Some scenes are almost exactly like my rough cut. And then some things are just worked and worked and worked and worked.
When Mike assembled the scene in the woods with Henri Gatien.
That's the one I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, my jaw hit the floor. I mean, particularly like when Henri shoves his thumb up against John's head and it cuts from, there's like 3 cuts there just for that one beat. But the final one, Henri's hat is off. There's this weird fluff floating through the air. Like he managed to this is just, for me, the process of working with Mike was magical. I loved the collaboration in the edit. And, but that moment alone, if we took out the rest of the movie, which we might, and then we would just leave just the moment.
Just do that moment.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah. The fluff flies by and the movie's over.
I like to slip in some major continuity fuckery somewhere in every movie I touch. So it's like, wait a minute. It's like, yeah, you didn't care if you were. That's the one.
But shooting that scene was so amazing. The choreography with the cameraman and us actors, it felt like each time we did it, it felt like such a triumph that all of the weaving around each other that we did and connecting was like, it was glorious.
We shot the scene in its entirety. I don't know, I want to say 3 or 4 times with a camera operator with a Peter.
Steadicam.
Thank you, Steadicam.
Yeah.
And each take was 11 minutes long. I mean, it was, in fact, the SAG rep was there that day and I think checked in with the actors to make sure that they were okay with the idea that they would have 11 whole minutes of continuous acting.
Yes, they took us aside and like, no, we can do it. We are theater actors.
But that's another example that the tone is very hard to pick out. Like, I think David Lynch is hilarious. I think The Sopranos at the time was one of the funniest shows on TV. Maybe that's why I was always pushing Jason, for more blood in this movie. But it's also, it's this hallucinatory emotional experience. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you just have to, you can't always put the forethought into it and say, I'm going to go for this. You just have to feel it and then see if it's too much, see if it's engaging, see if it's truthful. And then is it funny? Are these moments reading? It's iterations, really. Can't skip it. We had to discover it and trust the process like you would with an actor.
That's great. I mean, that's a beautiful answer. I'm going to go to some of the questions I received from the audience. And if there's anyone listening, there is an option that you could send anything and I will ask. So I have a question from Nikki, who has a question for David Patrick Kelly, as well as the other cast. I loved all of your performances. What was your process like in preparing for your roles?
I wanted to play a French Canadian. And you can correct me. Maybe, my memory's not so good, Caridad, but did I suggest Courrier du Bois?
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because that was my depth of my research, and about fur traders, and I could sing you Acadian Driftwood right now if you want by the band, but so I enjoyed that aspect of it very much, but to work with O-Lan and Robbie was really thrilling. And to expand on what O-Lan was saying, it was like a ballet. Well, we kind of tripped out, to use an old expression from the 60s, and just got into a place where we didn't really notice, what I didn't anyway, what the camera was doing, and which probably accounts for that jump where my hat flipped off. But it was just continuous, beautiful flow of these strange characters from a strange land who had this contract in hell, maybe, or I don't know where it came from, but it was really such a great pleasure out there in that forest, wherever we were, and so that was what it was. And to work on the song, because I knew April was going to sing Je ne regrette rien too, so I better come up to snuff. And I had my wife had bought me a 1913 Martin mandolin, ladies and gentlemen, for one of my birthdays. And so I got to play and suggest putting that into the movie, the beautiful mandolin. Yeah, so that's some of it. That's a few pieces.
Yeah, I would say that just like in terms of DPK, like came in like almost towards the end. And I think that's what's kind of amazing about it. We'd had like this crazy experience and had like a flow, and he just like stepped onto set. Obviously this character for me, I'm just like waiting I mean, this is a very pivotal moment for me and in my performance. And I have no idea what's gonna happen or the dynamic that's gonna, but like that experience was like, wow, it was like, I knew we were gonna get the payoff that we deserved in this movie from his performance. So it was really exciting for me when he stepped in and came and I think we read it once also on Skype one time. I think we might have a Skype read through too. And I was like, I kind of got a sense like, oh my gosh, well, I know what's coming. Then it was like really exciting to see. So it was really thrilling for me and O-Lan as well. I mean, everybody who stepped in, like, because April and I had a couple weeks just to ourselves at the beginning, and then every time Scott and O-Lan like came, it was like just opened up the world of the film in such a way that it was just exciting, and to get to have these new voices on set and these new dynamics come into the world was super thrilling as an actor.
Just changes what the world is. Like, you
Yeah.
think it's one thing, like, it's like, is it a buddy movie? Is it a love
Right.
story? What is that? And then, like, these two characters roll up on screen quite literally, and it's just like major tone shift. And the first time I saw the Henri Gatien like scenes, it was just like I wanted to go back and just watch the beginning frame by frame, because there's just so much information. Like, we got like Ma getting up and starting to walk on her legs, and then these guys are having a conversation. Like, John's eye is a disaster, and like Henri's there with his beautiful white outfit on and this glass of red wine. It's just like sensory overload. And then there's like, they're talking to each other and saying stuff and things are happening. I was just like, I just need to like watch this one sequence like 7 times. And I still like, it's just a lot to process.
Yeah, Chrissy's costumes, great. They were really lovely.
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic.
And it's in color.
Right.
I saw this, there was this photo of Edward Gorey in the New York Times. I don't know, as we were kind of putting design work together for the film, and I just I had it on paper, and I took a photograph of it and texted it to Chrissy, and I was like, this is Henri Gatien. And she just replicated. And then DP, you ended up growing a beard specifically, because I think I sent you that photo as well. And you ended up growing that beard, especially for the scene.
Well, I saw Edward Gorey, and I used to see him in the bookstore, and that doesn't exist anymore. Wise Books in the Diamond District of New York City, which is long gone, but he had that famous beard. So, but I think I also tried to put some Beckett in there. That I've always been a huge fan of his novels, which are these abstruse, insane things, this trilogy of novels by Beckett, and strange things happening in strange places, and so there's a bit of that there.
There was something about being able to trust all the other actors immediately on this very visceral level, that however they all prepared, the mystery world was all alive inside of us. And for me, it was just like I had to go so way down in just to be able to communicate from a place where I was trying to, because people on the set were saying like, how are you preparing? And it's like, I'm holding my breath, I'm going way down where there aren't any rules. And but I think the unspoken preparation is the hundreds of years of experience we've all had in the theater, where you are making up the world together on your on the stage. It's like a magic trick to create a world that you're all in at the same time and it doesn't have any spoken rules. It has just an understanding that you can rely on with each other.
I have to say too, like Scott and I, speaking of theater, are in the same theater company in New York Life called Elevator Repair Service. So we knew each other from that. And like there's some tough scenes that are intimate and violent. And we actually shot those first. And it was so comforting to have someone that I already know and trust to go there with without having to be like, okay, is it okay if I put my hand here? Yes, I give you permission. Okay, you know, like it could just be like, listen, like it's all fine, it's all fine. And, you know, like I wasn't worried about safety, like I wasn't worried about comfort level. I mean, like, of course we had those conversations, but like it just made it easier to go there. And that was helpful.
So I think we've been talking for an hour and this has been incredible. So I'm going to start rounding things down. So the last question, which is also a comment, but a short comment, is from Savannah. And she would like to know what the funniest story on set was, but also she wants to add a side note. You are all so lovely.
Oh.
So, and I agree. So that's very sweet.
What was the funniest thing? Oh, for me, the funniest thing on set was in the bathroom. Too short at the beginning and took a long time to shoot. But Robbie's pratfalls in that scene just literally had me laughing out loud, so loud that we had to like scrub my laughter out of the dialogue track when we were editing because I was cackling so much every time he fell on his face in both the bathroom and then outside bathroom. That, for me, that was the funniest.
That's such a good question. Funniest thing that happened on set. It was so long ago. It's hard to even remember, honestly.
I mean, it was literally a different lifetime ago at this point, right?
I will say training.
The training. Some of the funny things were just because it's hard and challenging. That's what becomes funny. It's how you sort of get through those moments. Like when it was so cold and April was wearing nothing in these scenes where we're all shivering. And I mean, I was wearing 2 coats and a ski jacket. And then it was snowing. And here we are, we had 1 cover set. And everybody just, you know, totally rallied. And yeah, it does seem so long ago. Robbie, you're right.
We had some fun with that lighter. You remember that scene that we were basically trying to light the whole scene from one Zippo lighter? And so it was like just constantly new adjustments to the thing. But you didn't really realize what was going to happen until you're in the middle of the scene. You light the lighter and just went, this, you know, it's like this tall.
And you're in a wooden box car and you have
full of straw.
Yeah, no danger there. But it was kind of funny. Now it's kind of funny because remember Jen and Jason, we had wrapped for the day. It was really late and it was one of the extra cold days. And we were just, all of us in our, we were in the office and we were like, we've got to get some heat. We have to get some heat. We cannot put the actors in this car anymore without heat. And we finally get that freaking heater, blow our budget. And then when we start blowing that heater, it's like, it's too hot. Get the heater out of here. It was like,
did I say that? I don't think I ever said that.
Maybe I might not have.
I was in the Austin. I thought it would be warm. It was like 40 degrees. And
it was 27 degrees one day.
Yeah, I did not laugh on that day.
No,
I always find it really hilarious when you spend about a half an hour or 45 minutes setting up a table intricately with all the props and everything, and then the wind just takes it right away. Just blows away. And we did have an ongoing joke with the mandolin, where, you know, it was a 1913 really rare mandolin. So I would shout to the crew, you know, watch out for the 1913 mandolin, and hand it off all the time. I was very amused, very amused.
Justine, I know we were telling funny stories, but I think it would be really remiss of us if we didn't have everybody maybe comment or give just a nod about, you know, before we started taping the call, we were all kind of commiserating about how the relevancy of this film is just, it's almost like one thing after another. And we started off by one of the questions we were talking about was the drive-in. And even that, you know, we're seeing movies in drive-ins now, you know, because of, you know, COVID. And I think that would be something interesting, at least just to talk about for a moment.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great way of kind of ending things. And one of the things about the film that I think touched me so much is that there is a lot of hopelessness and darkness, but there still is so much compassion and so much warmth on the other hand. I think it would be lovely if you guys could discuss kind of maybe even rewatching or re-engaging with the material under these very different and new circumstances.
I think oh, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I just, I hadn't seen the movie in a while. And when John and Mary are approaching the railroad tracks while they're walking, and John's kind of like haranguing Mary, and he starts asking her what her problem with cops is, like that moment for me really resonated in a way that I was really kind of, I'm still a little bit speechless about. And, you know, it also actually honestly made me think like, oh, you know, I mean, you could speak to this way better than me, April, but I was thinking maybe for April, this was like, maybe it didn't come as a surprise that it was shocking, because, you know, that's the lived experience for an African-American person in the United States. Whereas for me as a privileged white guy, like I haven't had a terrible run-in with the cops myself personally, you know? So anyway, but that moment for me, I was like, wow, I didn't predict that right now. That's for sure.
Well, it's funny because I was just having this conversation. I myself personally too have never had a bad run-in with a cop. But you know, it definitely feels like a fact that there's a way that power can be used in this country with law enforcement that can be sinister and dangerous. And it feels so prescient that, like, you know, those words were written maybe 20 years ago when we had some kind of illusion of like, well, you know, if you just do what you're supposed to do, then everything works out fine. And to call that out before we were using woke as a hashtag, like, is pretty remarkable. And it's I mean, you know, we could talk about having a Black female person who is economically disadvantaged in a largely white world, and like how we talk about like Mexicans in this play that's written by a person of Latinx heritage. Like there's a lot of very potent stuff in this show that I feel like we were able to have conversations about. And I chalk that up to my relationship with Jason, that there was nothing that I felt like I needed to sit on or not say out loud in the room, and that I was always heard. So it made me something that this was something that I knew I could stand by and be proud of. And, you know, now it holds up in a way that I feel good about.
Yeah, like a lightning, like lightning coming down at the right time. And an argument that's everywhere these days that's really hitting with me is the cynical use of poor people against each other. They're being used, pitted against each other. And you see it play out in the movie on the train, where there becomes like an instant class warfare going on. And, that's another thing that hits like lightning, this kind of, poor folks being used against each other, cynically in a horrible way. It's important to think about that and to get beyond it.
And I would say that for me, what comes up with this story, it's sort of, I know that I said earlier, I felt like I was transmitting when I was writing it. But part of it had to do with, one, acknowledging, as I think from a writer's standpoint, sadly, history does repeat itself. So there's that. So, and I knew I wanted to deal with abandonment, that all the people in this story are abandoned by society in one way or another. And yes, I agree with David that there's kind of like a pecking order that occurs then. Who's most abandoned in the story? But actually, it's about looking at systems that have caused this to happen in a deliberately, intentionally desolate world that seemingly seems like the skies are not going to come through and actually create a moment of grace for these folks. But I feel, and maybe that's the romantic in me, but I feel like states of grace are possible. and so looking for that even in the most abandoned and damaged circumstances, where systems are forcing people into situations and actions that are causing even more damage, let's say. It's sort of playing out a vicious cycle. I feel like there's a way of breaking through that cycle. So in a way, I think for me, thinking about, and I think watching the film again tonight, I was sort of like, oh, right. It's sort of about that. And I think that because for me, the ending has many meanings, and some of them are very secret. But I'll say that one of those meanings sort of crystallized tonight, and that was like really moving to just kind of, it sort of rose to the surface in a way I hadn't expected before.
I like that thing too, symbolically too, going back to that line, where Robbie John is talking about his love for movies, what they mean to him, how they shine, and the windows going by, and it's like a movie right there. And they're in a movie, of course. And then Mary brings it to earth by saying, I don't want to see 20-foot people walking around. I want real people. I want real people. I want reality. I want, and there's no pie on the screen. There's no pie in the sky. There's no heaven that way. There's real people and what you can do here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's beautiful. I just wanted to thank all of you. Just having the chance to speak with everyone involved and having so many people here, I think speaks to how collaborative and how loving this whole experience was. I don't think you can fake that kind of feeling towards the work that you do and the sentiment that you bring to it. That's definitely what came across when I watched it, and just having that confirmed today is like absolutely incredible. I hope that more people have a chance to watch it. It will be playing again on September 2nd at 3 p.m. And then, of course, for Americans, it will be playing at Austin Film Fest very soon. I believe it's in October. So definitely check that out. I'd like to thank everyone again for being here, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Zoom or you're one of our lovely cast and crew and panelists. Thank you so much. This has been such a privilege for me. Bon cinéma. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
could we just ask everybody that is watching the Q&A and that if you did have a wonderful, well, we hope you had a wonderful experience or a moving experience, that you'll share that on social media.
Please do.
You'll and that you'll hashtag Fugitive Dreams Film, like our page, you know, please share that on social media, because for an independent film, it can make all the difference, having a lot of eyeballs on it and just getting kind of a buzz created about it. So we would really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Justine.
Thank you. I one last thank you, crew. Good to see you from Leela Wilson. So maybe you know her. So
hi, Lila.
Yeah, Lila.
Okay, so
thank you, Justine.
Thank you. We're going to be shutting down in a second.
Nice to see all of you.
Thank you, Montreal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Montreal.